Instagram's triggered us.
We're talking about training intent.
The differences between training for like specific purposes and training for not overshooting, not undershooting, training for the actual intent.
If you give someone, say, a 7 or a 7.5 for a single, you're looking at 92%. So that's opener. So what's your intent around in opener?
Nothing else is in my mind except for hitting that single with like the utmost intent and focus that I can, because, you know, 7 is still hard.
If you shift your mind into thinking, oh, I've got an RPE 7 for a single, I've got to test my opener. What's your intent now? Right? Very different. You're thinking about that whole session completely differently. High performing athlete has to make thousands of decisions. Every session, every set, every exercise, stresses in life, food choices to make. So what happens is somebody highly dependent on a coach to make all those decisions. It creates this huge limitation. If an athlete's only capable of making 100 decisions within the 1,000 decisions, they're only working at a 10% efficiency. If the athlete can make 80% of the decisions, then our role becomes to help solve the hard stuff. No good if 90% of the problem is that you just don't eat enough. So you get stuck at those decisions. We help people come to the solution through understanding, reflection, providing the tools to give them that ability to make decisions.
Non-directive approach still creates and yields like better results than directive coaching. I feel like solely directive coaching has like a short lifespan. A non-directive approach and also educating as well, people understand why they're doing it, which makes them want to do it even more and make their decisions even more, I feel. It allows us to have more of a bandwidth to be able to give them that greater support. Like,
so you bring up this, we're talking about training intent, right? What's spurred that conversation again around training intent?
I think we were just talking about the differences between like training for like specific purposes and training for not overshooting, not undershooting, training for the actual intent of what.
Yeah. I think I think you always got to remember that RPE is really important, but it is super objective. Subjective, not objective. It's very subjective.
Wish it was objective.
Yeah. Well, we try our best to make it more objective, you know. We've recently built I made this calculator called RPE ranging, and basically it's off a principle of regression models. So if anyone listening, if you can collect enough data, you can make something subjective be more objective. So this is like if you gather this is why I try to teach people to use historical data rather than like using the RPE calculators, because they just don't work very well. You have to use, if you collect like a couple of weeks worth, you get this better picture, right, of like what you're capable of doing today, and it's a range. But what I want to talk about today is training intent. And training intent is, you can call it like another level of auto-regulation, right? And it helps to make your RPE, allows you to select RPE a little bit better because you go in with a very particular mindset. A recent client always had an idea of a natural progression, an idea of linear, like we don't teach athletes to do linear progression, but it's such a natural way to think, right? Especially in a state where beginners are always used to making constant progress, right? And that happens for like 2-3 years. So for it to all of a sudden stop working, it puts people in I guess a bit of place confusion. I think there's a period of time there. There's like a transition period where people will have to learn, okay, I don't make results every week or every month or every competition, you know? Do you remember your experiences?
Yeah, I was just about to say I've been quite enjoying that that kind of like newbie gains again, doing strongman. Obviously learning like new movements. I kind of am able to linearly progress them each week.
Fun.
Yeah, yeah. It's fun because it's been a very long time since I've been able to do that. Like
Mm.
powerlifting specifically. Um, yeah, it is a
Yeah,
tough
I'm doing
transition.
that. Yeah, it is. Like it's very rewarding, obviously, to have that constant progress, and that's what creates the addiction, I think, initially. And then the mindset has to change from like that feeling to long-term drive. Yeah, like it's like I gotta find a way to slow down, really. But I'm getting that too as well with BJJ at the moment doing jiu-jitsu. It's like it's not a strength sport, but it's on the it is on you can technically put all sports on the spectrum of strength somewhere. Most of them, otherwise it either fits on there or in a like endurance sport, which is a little bit different. But you would put this in the realm of strength, and it's not just like strength itself, because I already have a lot more strength than everyone else in there, and I easily overpower everyone. But it's a skill set. It's a huge skill set, just like strongman. It's a huge skill set, and you can make progress just by improving your technique, improving your intuition with the skill acquisition itself. So like you get to feel, you can feel the interaction between you and the stone and you and the log. So are you starting to feel, because we're doing a lot of, we're doing tons of technique volume. Have you been, feel like you've been building a stronger intuition with how your body moves?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think like the first few weeks, I obviously felt like a Bambi. I didn't know what my legs were doing, didn't know what my
Mm.
upper body was doing, and it was kind of like 1 rep out of 10, say, was good, and then the other 9 where I was like, that was shit. But now it's kind of like flipping. It's like I've got like 9 good reps, and like one, I'm like, oh, I messed that one up. It's like I know why I messed it up. So it's like, yeah, it's been good. It's been fun to be in that position again.
So back on training intent. So I would say I put it as a layer of another layer of RPE, or another layer of auto regulation. So it creates a little bit more objectivity around what your prescription is and what it's for. So when you're coming into, when we want to create, say, more volume of work, because the intent behind a specific block of training will be about me wanting to get a specific outcome from that. A lot of blocks are probably based around technique. So if we have a technique block, we need to accumulate enough volume with enough intensity to still make progress. But the problem is that some people come into a mindset of wanting to always break their best and always want to beat last week. But the thing is, our strengths fluctuate every session, every day, and they fluctuate based off how much training we've been doing in the last few weeks, how that fatigue is accumulated, what the day was like, what kind of day you had, how much the stress impacts, how well you're regulating your mind, and the way you start to think about it. So some people put a lot of pressure on themselves weeks in advance about thinking about, I'm going to hit this number on this week. It's like, you got to remove that thinking and stop trying to hit the upper ends of the ranges and start to think of it like the job is to get in, do work, and accumulate practice, right? If you can, if you've gone, feels like it's heavier than last week and you had to go lighter, but it still feels like the prescription, say it's 7 RPE for sets of 3 reps, you still hit the target and you're still going to get the stimulus response. And just because you didn't hit heavier than last week doesn't mean you're not making progress. And so people let themselves down more so by trying to chase something that isn't there for that day. And you can kind of say the same thing for, say, something like a heavy single. So if I give someone, and this is why I can't always prescribe it like this for some people, but if you give someone, say, a 7 or a 7.5 for a single, technically on the like conversion charts, you're looking at around 99. So that's roughly an opener. So what's your intent around an opener? I mean, you tell, like, what kind of intent, what kind of mindset are you in coming into a competition when you have an opener?
Yeah, well, like a RP7 single is nothing else is in my mind except for hitting that single with like the utmost like intent and focus that I can, because 7 is still hard, still heavy. It's still a lot of focus. It's still a lot of intent around hitting the right.
And that's the key. Like, that's the key. It's the intent. If you come in like, oh, it's just a 7 for a single, yeah, it's going to be fucking sloppy, right? Because you think 7 is not much. But if you shift your mind into thinking, oh, I've got an RPE 7 for a single, to I've got to test my opener, what's your intent now? Right? Very different. You're thinking about that whole session completely differently. And you're going to come in a lot more ready. Now, when you do an opener, openers are hard, but still a lot to take. You can still do a big jump and still hit your next one. And there's a really cool auto regulation that I've liked. I haven't used it too much with people, and Stu actually kind of introduced it to me. He called it jumps. How many jumps can you do from attempts? And I think that language is a little bit better for someone who's advanced, definitely, because I can think of lifts in jumps. If I do 220 deadlift, I usually know what my next jump is. Like I can go from 220 to 250. Right, that's usually my jump. For someone who's quite intuitive with it, like you'd be like yourself, you know you're going to know your jumps. So if you say you do instead of a 7 RP for a single, you say 2 jumps. So you're 2 jumps from max. So if you're 2 jumps from max, that's opener, second, third attempt. So it's an opener, right? It sort of feels like. It's the same with like reps in reserve. I think reps in reserve are okay up until advanced level where it's not quite intuitive because you can do a single, no, you don't have a second rep, but no, you can add a lot more to it because we get very good at doing singles. But I could still jump 20 kilos, but there's no way I'm doing 2 reps at whatever. If I'm doing 330, I could probably do 2 reps. So it's like, but I could jump, say 230. If it felt good, I could jump to say 350. But doing 2 reps at 330 is hard if maybe not be able to do it.
Yeah, I think RPE is a great tool and it works for so long, but kind of like the same things. Like I've trained so long and so hard to be very good at 1 rep. So like my RPE 7 probably looks harder than what most people is, but I still know that I can jump.
Yeah, exactly. So
thinking back like in the animal cage, it's like my first rep at 300, I'd probably call that a 7, and probably still looked harder than what most people's. But I know I still had 2 more reps.
Yeah, and that's where people's upper cap is too low. So like for some people they say 7 feels easy, but it's like really not. It just means your upper cap's too low, right? Because it just means that your bell curve for what reps you can do or proximity to failure is super, super low, which then just makes it disproportionate to what 7RP really is. So if you're already, say, 5% off your true max, that's about 1, maybe 1.5 reps from failure, which means you're going from a 7 RPE to a 5.5 RPE or 6 to 5.5 if you do the math, right? And obviously this is what I'm trying to do with everyone. Everyone on the team trying to get to understand the math a little bit more, because you need to make it less subjective and at least have enough objective data to make a better decision. And that's it. This is all decisions. Now, people can say like, well, why don't we just prescribe percentages and stuff? Well, I've found it largely problematic. Prescribing percentages, not all the time. I still prescribe percentages some of the time, especially if I'm trying to apply a heavy constraint on someone. But that's it. Like, percentages are a very strong constraint. You constrain the athlete from making any sort of proper decision that's going to allow the best adaptation, right? If you got more that day, if the intent of doing a single at 80, or say doing a triple at 85%, that's fairly intense. That's probably equal to about an 8 RPE for a 3. Now that's some intense that's kind of intense level, but the thing is, if you now have the RPE, we know what that intent feels like, and it doesn't feel like that, and it feels easier, well, you've just understimulated. So this is why it's better to overlay a form of auto regulation so that they can make adjustments, intent so they know what the outcome is meant to be, so they don't either overreach underreach or plan their mindset to come into that properly. Yeah. I would say that kind of summarizes training intent. I would say you put it in ways like you got to come in either A, with more preparation, intensity. I would say, what's the word called when you're like very diligent about something? Very, very
I think just like
purposeful,
very,
I would say maybe.
yeah, purposeful and prepared and purposeful. I think work quite well to like kind of like summarize that. I feel.
And there's also times to just come in and do the work. Like it's you just come in and put in the reps. You don't have to put so much pressure on yourself to get progress every week. I mean that's I mean at that level, I mean it's daunting to want to try to progress every week. Especially if you have really good training intent, is exhausting. It can actually be exhausting because you're actually getting the most out of your training by having an immense level of purpose and intent behind every session. And then I find that taxing, but I don't have to do much and I get a lot out of a lot less. At the peak of my training was so minimal. I would never, because I could get so much out of so little, I was only doing one set, right? And my volume sets were just really light because, yeah, it's just too taxing on the body to do anymore now. I'm not saying anyone can do that, but most people haven't earned their stripes enough to get to a level where you have such level of execution and intent that you can train like that. But at the same time, I think it's a balance, isn't it? You got some people who are so, like, people need to be either a little bit more analytical and some people need to be less analytical. And it's just finding that balance between the two. Because if you don't think enough, well, those people also don't usually either either massively overshoot or massively undershoot. And over analytical tend to always undershoot. So if you were to put them into two categories, well, who does better out of the two worst case scenarios, very analytical or under analytical? I would say the under analytical person would do slightly better at some parts to a degree in terms of like absolute strength. They probably might get stronger. But if you can if you can dial someone's analytical back a little bit, then they can do really well. They can do better. Way better, is because I think a lot of hyper analytical people assess the risk too much, and athletic performance is about somewhat taking a level of risk, or I would say learning to manage your fear around it or something, you know.
Yeah, I feel like, and especially in the sport that we do where it's a one rep at your most extreme, I feel like there is an element of risk I think will always be there. You know, we push our bodies to their absolute limit to find its absolute limit. So I think it's like there will always be that risk part. And it's our job as coaches to, I guess, manage that.
Yeah, that's it. I just recently was talking to someone online about the different styles of coaching. We were talking about dependency with coach, that clients have with coaches. And it was funny because I was talking to another coach and saying, I was telling him, like, oh, look, I try to coach more autonomous, like get people to be more autonomous rather than having a lot of direction or a lot of directive. I wouldn't say direction. If you want to create lots of direction, you want to be less directive and them have more autonomy. And it's funny because their immediate assumption was that we don't give them any contact. Like it's like, oh, well, yeah, but some people really like the support and really like the extra support. It's like, So some people getting this quite confused because I see things the other way. The people who are being created a high level dependency have less support, and we have enormous amount of support. Like, what can people do with us? They can book in with us one-on-one anytime. There's no week. You do this weekly or do this monthly. Whatever you need, you book it whenever you want. You can communicate whenever you want. You can get your technique feedback whenever you want. We do our best to get that within 1 to 2 days. 2 days is the worst. We also then run collaborative work, which I see we get the most results out of. We do like collaborative coaching where we have, and then not only that, we build these like master classes to give people the tools to make better decisions. And that's the thing there. A high performing athlete has to make thousands of decisions, thousands and thousands of decisions, every session, every set, every exercise, how you're going to move, what kind of intent you're going to come in with, what are you going to do before your training, how you're going to do that before your training. What if it wasn't good enough? How are you going to how are you going to audit your routine to improve your ability to get more out of your training? Stresses in life, food choices to make, right? There's so many decisions, right? So what happens if somebody highly dependent on a coach to make all those decisions? Well, you can only make decisions with another person at a certain pace. Rule of thumb of helping a coach helping someone else, giving like specific interventions is usually about 1 to 3 interventions per cycle. Now that isn't much compared to facing the 1,000 decisions you got to make every day. However, and what also it does is it creates this huge limitation. If an athlete's only capable of making 100 decisions within the 1,000 decisions, they're only working at a 10% efficiency. So I'm stuck at that 10 to 20% of making decisions for them. And we can't open up all this other ability. If the athlete can make 80% of the decisions, then our role becomes something like to help solve the hard stuff. And you probably have noticed too, like if people are still stuck on the same problem, still trying to make the same decisions, how hard is it to progress them?
Very hard.
Right? Because, and the most difficult clients are the ones who also, and this is why I work towards autonomy. Some people don't like it. Some people want to be directed everywhere. Unfortunately, those individuals don't go very far. Now, some of these people are also super, super strong, but nothing really changes at it after a certain point because they have the inability, because the more stronger you get, your decisions go from 1,000 decisions to 2,000 to 3,000 to 4,000 decisions. But how does someone regulate so many decisions? Well, training. You practice it. Like for you, you don't realize you make 1,000 decisions a day about your training. It's so natural to you now, which is good because then when you do need my help, we're solving hard problems, right? Like how much work, like when we work hard together on a problem, it's normally to solve one hard problem, right? Where like you have one issue that's stopping you and that's all we work on. But if you're still stuck figuring out how to do RPE or how to do your macros, well, I can't really help with that advanced thing if you can't even eat properly. Right? What's the point? It's like, oh yeah, but I can't I can't just fix this little tiny 1%er. So it's like, okay, well, no good if 90% of the problem is that you just don't eat enough. So you get stuck at those decisions. And there's a difference between was it directive coaching and non-directive coaching. We take a non-directive approach, but I say it's a bit of a spectrum though. Like we direct when we need to, but we do non-directive, which means we help people come to the solution through understanding, reflection, providing the tools to give them that ability to make decisions. And because of that, we have to give a tremendous amount of support.
But even in saying that too, though, I feel like the non-directive approach still creates and yields like better results than directive coaching. I feel like solely directive coaching has like a short lifespan. I think
it is.
Yeah, clients or whoever will get sick of being told what to do, and then they want to do something else, and then clash heads, and then they go elsewhere. But I think having the non-directive approach and also educating as well, people understand why they're doing it, which makes them want to do it even more and make their decisions even more, I feel.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. Like when people when you focus on high directive coaching and you create the athlete creates a dependency, the client creates a dependency to the coach. But the dependency becomes so intense that even their motivation or their drive is only directed through the coach. So they lack this ability to have internal drive. And the problem with that is that if you want to take the sport seriously or any sport, there are going to be lots of times where you feel like shit and you don't want to train. And what gets you through it, right? You can't just rely on external motivation. That only gets you so far. You need that internal compass, that internal drive. And we do that. We create that by, getting people to learn to manage their problems themselves with high level of support and guidance. So they feel supported whilst they're still challenging themselves physically, mentally, right? Like we challenge them, right? There's all these guys who are a lot of mental challenges, but we're not holding their hand, but we're there to support them, and that makes them feel safe to do so, right?
Yeah, I
And
think
directive coaching doesn't allow it.
I
Yeah.
think it allows us to have more of a bandwidth to be able to give them that greater support. Like, you know,
Mm.
spending an hour every day, 8 hours a day on the gym floor creates a very short bandwidth, I feel, to be able to give that support and to people. I think, when I think like a lot of our support is a lot of questions and problem solving can be done quite quickly, and we're able to get to like the resolve quite quickly. And I think that allows us to have like that bandwidth width to give them the greatest support that I think we possibly can.
Yeah, bandwidth. It's all bandwidth. Like that's the thing. Like, and it's their bandwidth too. Like, I can't if I have to when there's so many more decisions to make, right? I can't give them 5, 6, 7 things, right? Because you know what happens when you give them 10 things, right? They succeed at 2 and fail at 8. What does that mean? Well, that means failure. But if you give 1 or 2 things, right, and they get both, and they still only got 2, that's still a win. That's a win compared to losing out on 8 things. And it's hard to then prioritize now. That's obviously working on 2 things at a time at a cadence of 1 session per week is really slow, incredibly slow. It means you make exactly about 104 decisions a year. Right? And that's a slow cadence. That's a really slow cadence. You know what you want to be making? You want to be making cut 5 to 10 decisions a day, right? Now you're moving at a pace in a few weeks of what someone takes a year. And we see that, right? We see how much faster people make progress. Like they just spent years only progressing a little bit, and then in a month or two, they've like quadrupled their progress, even if they've already been training for a really long time. It's because the pace of decision making is quick, and I think even in our recent one, we did a huge challenging workshop. Some of the things that people say, and they almost felt like they're having a existential crisis because of how much we expose challenges that they were experiencing, like exposing the truth, the hard truths. And that's what we do. Like things can't be challenged, if I and that's I think pampering your clients, I think kind of comes from a fear of coaches thinking they're going to lose their clients. You got to give them you got to give your clients the benefit of the doubt. And when you do, you know what? They thrive. Clients thrive when you give them then their autonomy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've seen that like a few times, right? Like people have come to us who are quite dependent, and we've challenged their like I guess what they think is right and what coaching should look like. And they've done like a polar 180 flip, and they're they're independent. They're making like huge progress, like mentally and physically. I think their mental well-being is 10 times better than like when they started with us. I think it's pretty cool to watch. I think people's change in their
Yeah,
shifts.
it's rewarding because you realize that their limitation was that they just weren't supported, and no level of direction was going to help because it was internal for them, right? And then that's what we address. All right. If we can address their mind, address the way they think, how they feel about themselves, then they just explode. They become like we think. I think we were thinking of like one person, and she's just like complete mind shift change, and puts her in a place of I don't know. She's just like so much happier, and now she enjoys the process. And I think that's where like the process and having discipline and routine, there has to be one crucial factor is that you enjoy it. Because we've been in places where we don't enjoy it and it sucks the life out of you. But if you enjoy it and you're in a good place, you love it. You love it. And that's the key. If you love it, that's where those are your best preps. Those are your thriving preps. Those are your thriving years.
Yeah, I think there's a saying, and I think it's like MMA based, but it's like a dangerous fighter is like a happy fighter, and it's like it's so true. I think like
Mm,
my last prep, I was probably in like the best place mentally, and it kind of like we reaped those rewards. So I think it's
mm,
definitely true, and it definitely like reads true.
mm. Yeah, I would get that. The first coach I saw here, um, he's definitely probably the most deadliest MMA fighter here in like Thailand. But he was like you wouldn't. You'd pick it because he's got the look like the cauliflower ears and all that stuff, and it's like okay, you know this guy's stage, but he's the most happiest out of everyone like I've met so far in the fighting world. He's like the most happiest, chill, down to earth person I met. But he'll be the most. He's the most deadliest person you could ever mess with, and he probably wouldn't even unless he really had to. You know.
Yep. Yeah, I think it carries over and transfers to powerlifting as well. I think if you're enjoying it and you're happy, I think it's a dangerous place for the competition.
Yeah. Anything else? That kind of unpacks that. I guess the two big things we talked about that came up this week: intent and the autonomy around coaching.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there to take away from that.
Right, well, we might leave it there. I think there's lots to learn for everyone from there. Cool. Alrighty, we'll leave it there.
All right, catch you later.